Hi, this is Ruben Lara, and today we're going to be talking about setting up your workspace for Clip Studio on iOS. Now, Clip Studio for iOS or iPad lets you pair up a keyboard, which is awesome, but I want to talk about the more likely scenario that you'll be using it without one. So the goal on any tablet would be to maximize the space and make your tools as accessible as possible for use without a keyboard. And I'll be focusing more on a right-handed setup. But one of the reasons why I love Clip Studio is that it's so flexible in terms of customizing your layout. So all the principles we talk about now will definitely be applicable to setting it up for a left-handed artist as well. The first thing you want to understand is the difference between palette minimization modes. And what I mean by that is if you look at any one of the toolbars or palettes, you'll see that they have a single arrow and a double arrow icon in one of the corners. And the difference is in being able to hide or minimize the palette as an icon set. So I'm going to open the layers palette and just drag it here off to the side, and you'll see a little red bar up here, and that means that it's a dockable place. So I'll just put that there for a moment. And if I click on the single right-hand arrow, you'll notice that it minimizes the palette to a single icon, where you can click on it again and it kind of floats the palette over your canvas, and when you click out, it docks it back into an icon mode. Conversely, if you click on the double arrows, it actually opens up that palette completely, no longer floating, and moves your canvas over to accommodate the new palette size. When it's in its full docked state, clicking out of it doesn't hide it anymore, and it also gives you the flexibility of resizing this palette to a size that works for you. So once again, clicking the single icon docks it to an icon. Clicking the double icon hides it completely. So this is helpful for deciding, which palettes we might want to put into a dock that will hide completely and which ones we can, we'll want to float over. The first thing I always like to do is display my most used palettes and kind of decide which palettes I want to have the most access to all the time. Now I'm going to arrange things to the way I like to work, but of course it should fit your workflow and the kind of work you're doing at the moment. So when I'm painting, I want to have access to my most frequently used tools, my color wheel, and my color slider. So I'll just pull that out momentarily, make that a little bit smaller, and I'm going to go ahead and dock it to this middle zone right here. The other thing I'd like to have access to is this quick access toolbar. We'll talk about this a little bit more. So I'm going to pull this out and dock it to the middle there. And you see that now I have the color wheel as one tab and the quick access toolbar as another. So I'm just going to move that back down to the bottom. And now we have, a split palette there with quick access on top and color wheel on the bottom. The other thing I want to do is pull out my brush size palette. And because I don't have access to any hardware buttons on my stylus like I might on a Wacom tablet, I find that I'm using the brush size palette a lot more on the iOS version. So I'm going to pull this and just move it right between those two. So now I have my color wheel, my brush size, and my quick access tool set there. Now, if you're unfamiliar with a lot of these functions and what these palettes are, make sure to check out my free Clip Studio Basics tutorial on YouTube. And that will get you familiar with how Clip Studio works, how to change your brush settings, and some equivalent Photoshop workflows. And so everything that applies to the desktop version applies to the iOS version as well. The next thing I really like to have when I'm painting is my color slider. So I'll just click the single arrow to dock that back to its icon mode. We'll come here to Window and Color Slider. This I'll pull out. We'll hide that. And I'm going to put this at the very bottom. Once again, I can resize the canvas so that I just see the color slider. I like to use the HSV color sliders, and now I have access to that. So this is my basic setup. We're going to do a couple more things just to clean this up a little bit more and give myself a little more space. So I'm actually going to hide my toolbar palette. I'm going to hide all of these other palettes that are still accessible, but I don't need them all the time. So I'll hide that. I have a little more space now for my canvas. And when I'm painting, I'm only working on one layer anyway. What I like about this particular workspace is, again, I have my colors accessible. I have easy access to my brush sizes. We're going to set up some commonly used tools here in our quick access toolbar. And if I don't want to see my layers palette, all I need to do is show it and hide it using the double arrows, especially during stages where I'm pretty much working on one layer most of the time anyway. So I'll just hide it there. Lastly, let's hide the main menu to save space. So we'll come here to this icon that has the 4 boxes in it, and we'll just say hide menu bar. And so the nice thing about this little icon is it gives us access to the full menu anyway, which I find I'm not going to all the time, but if I need it, I know where to find it. And that saves just a little bit of space there. Now, one of the things you really want to do, especially on a small tablet like this, is maximize your thumb for some kind of functionality. So let's do that using the quick access toolbars. Now, we can always use our thumb here with our main tool set, but there's a lot of tools there, and I find I'm kind of taking a lot of time, distinguishing where I am in the tool set, especially since I don't have a keyboard, and so I don't have quick access to those tools with the letter keys. So that's why I'm going to hide this main toolbar. And the nice thing about the quick access toolbar is the buttons are large. I can easily see them with my thumb, and there's some really helpful stuff here. For example, if I go ahead and just zoom in, I can reset the display, which sets my canvas to fit to screen. I can easily flip vertical and flip horizontal. And there's some other functions like free transform and mesh transformation that I find are really helpful. Again, I could be going to the menu system for this, but to be able to just have access to it from the quick access tool set is wonderful. So we're going to create our own set, which they've already set up a set 2 here to help us to understand that we can set up our own quick access sets. And I'm going to put tools in there that I most often use when I'm doing this oil type style painting. So we're going to go into the quick access settings, and I'll just kind of flip through here and set it up with things I use often. So first I'll go into the tool palette, and I'll go into the brush menu. One of the nice things about the way they've set this up is you can use your finger to navigate any of the palette lists. So if you're having a hard time, grabbing the scroll bar since it's so tiny, just use your finger and you'll find yourself really running through these long lists very quickly. So I'm going to put the oil paint flat brush in there, and you'll see that it immediately adds that to the quick access set 2. The next thing I like to use is my smooth watercolor blender brush. I use my finger there. Soothing watercolor, add. I'm not a big fan of painting with airbrush, but I like to use the airbrush for kind of global color grading, so I'll use the soft airbrush there. I also like to use my lasso tool. So we'll come up here to selection, lasso, and I'm often using my lasso fill tool, and that's over here in figure, lasso fill. Another thing I'm often doing is switching my paint color from paint mode to transparency mode. If you don't know what that is, make sure to check out my tutorials, and I might just show that real quick as we do some painting here. And that's found under Option, Drawing Color, and Switch Drawing and Transparent Color. Lastly, let's throw our Reset Canvas in there as well. So that's under the main menu, View, and Reset Display. And we'll also do View Flip Horizontal. All right, let's set that for now. So there's my main set of tools. I'm gonna make this a little bit smaller. I'll make this brush size a little smaller. I usually find that I'm using somewhere between 40 and maybe 200 anyway, so I don't need a huge view there. And now I have quick access to the tools that I use most. So I'll just make a new layer real quick, and I can quickly go to my oil paint flat brush. And again, if you notice, I have it set to paint with transparency at the moment, so I'll just switch drawing color and transparent color. And every time I do that, you'll notice this little highlight switches from the drawing color to paint with transparency. Again, one of the really powerful features of Clip Studio is that you can turn any tool into an eraser. And so that's an example of that. So here I am on my oil paint flat brush. I'll just zoom in a little bit here, maybe just get some kind of random color. And as soon as I hit switch drawing color and transparent color, I'm now painting with full transparency, but with all of the attributes of the oil paint flat brush, which I really, really love. So I'm painting, changing brush size, switching to transparency, switching back to paint color, moving up a hue, going to my soothing watercolor for blending, going back to my oil paint flat brush. So I find it a nice setup for quickly navigating the tools I use the most with my thumb. We'll reset that. I'll move up to set 1. And the other one I find myself using often is clear. Next, Clip Studio lets you change what happens when you use the pencil versus your finger. So right now, if I'm on any one of the tools and I just use a single finger, it switches to the hand mode and lets me move my canvas around. I don't find that super helpful because I'm most often pinching and zooming anyway, and with my 2-finger pinch, I can not only zoom, but I can also move it around. So I find this to be a little bit redundant. So let's switch this to something that I find a little more helpful while I'm painting, and that is to switch it to an eyedropper tool or the color picker tool. Now, if we go to our toolbar, that's found under the eyedropper settings. And if we open this up and go to our tool set, we can see that there's an obtain display color and there's a pickup color from layer. The difference between the two is that if I'm on obtain display color, it will pick up the aggregate pixel value of all of the currently displayed layers, including adjustment layers. If I pick up color from layer only, it's only going to pick up color from that local layer and ignore any adjustments or any other layers that are on top of it. In this case, I'm just going to do obtain display color because I find that I'm using that one most often when I'm doing this style of painting. So we'll just hide that for a moment. And the place that you find that is in this new little icon here that has a picture and a finger on it. So I'm just going to open up its menu, and it's telling us, do we want to use Clip Studio using different tools with fingers and pen? Yes, that's the default. And that's why, you know, if I'm here on set 2 and I'm painting, right, and I use my finger, it's not painting anymore. It's actually switching to a different tool. So that's the mode that we want to stay on. And what we want to do is set the tool to use with our finger. So I'm going to click that, and that brings up a menu. And you'll notice here that there's a radio button that says Common Settings and Settings for each process of tool. If I click on Common Settings, this is basically the default functionality if I'm on any tool. So if I'm on any tool right now, single swipe, it changes the tool temporarily to a hand. And right now it's filtering out just the gestural commands, as you can see here. A lot of these have to do with the keyboards. So I'll just stay on gesture. But what I want to tell is when I'm on the brush tool, the oil paint flat brush tool, specifically, I want to change that to something else. So I'm going to change this to change tool temporarily, and it's going to ask me, well, what do you want to change it to? So I'm going to come over here to the eyedropper tool, and we'll select obtain display color. Great. So now when I'm on oil paint flat brush and I swipe, you'll see that immediately it now turns into a color picker. And the color picker is picking from this little crosshairs that's just above it. So it takes a little getting used to. It's not right over your finger, but it's actually a little more helpful because you can be a little more accurate with the color that you're picking. So I'm painting and I just need to do a quick swipe, and now I can immediately have access to the color that's, you know, that's right on top of that. Super helpful. Blending, going back to the oil paint flat brush, you know, picking a local color, and then moving on from there. Now it's also helpful to set it per tool because I don't always want the color picker to come up every time I use my finger. For example, if I am on the pencil tool where I'm most often sketching, and we'll just kind of come to a black color here real quick, what I prefer to happen is for the eraser tool to pop up. So I'll set that. We'll go to set tool to use with finger. I'm on the rough pencil tool. We'll change this to change tool temporarily. And in this case, let's choose the just a hard eraser here. Great. So when I'm on my pencil tool and I scrub, I'm erasing. But when I'm on my oil paint flat brush, I'm color picking. So a very powerful way to customize how each brush behaves when you use the stylus or your finger. Great. We'll come here to set 1 and just clear that layer, hide our tool palette, and come back to set 2. Another thing you want to capitalize on is the selection launcher that comes up with the Lasso tool. This is also available on the desktop version of Clip Studio. I tend to not use it so much on the desktop because I'm using keyboard shortcuts to transform or to deselect and so on and so forth. But using the selection launcher, you can really get some powerful functionality right after you create a selection. So here I'm going to layer with some content. And in fact, let me just make some new content here. Go to Oil Paint Flat Brush, grab a color. All right, come to my Lasso Tool, and we'll just hit a little selection there. And you'll notice this little selection launcher comes up. So familiarize yourself with what each of these things do. For example, this one deselects, easy enough. This one brings up the transform handles where you can rotate and move things around. Hit OK. This one will fill with your current color. This one will delete the selection, and several other functions that you should get to know. Next, let's make a small change to just optimize the performance. So we'll go into our menu system, we'll go into the Clip Studio Paint menu, come into Preferences, and under Performance, let's reduce the undo count, just so we're not taking up so much memory. I don't find that I'm undoing so many levels at once. I'm just gonna set this to 10. Lastly, don't forget to save a workspace for this particular task. So let's go here to the menu, Window, Workspace, and we'll register this workspace and name it. So in this case, I'll say this is the workspace I want to use when I am painting. Great. And maybe I have another workspace I use when I'm sketching. So let's set that up real quick. Let's go here to Manage Sets, and we'll call this one Painting as well. And let's create a new set for sketching. And there's our new set there. And we'll do the same thing. We just add the tools that we want to show up in this new quick set. Now, when I'm in sketching mode, I'm often not really using the color slider, so we'll just hide that. And let's save this out as another workspace. Now, we can quickly switch between these workspaces by going to Window, Workspace, Painting, and that brings us into the right palette space. And we could just switch to our quick access settings there and come back to our sketching workspace and go to our quick access sketching. So there you go. I hope that was helpful to get your workspace set up quickly, maximize your space, and make your most commonly used tools as accessible as possible. Have fun.